Everyone, my name is Samreen, and today I'll be giving the talk on private edge-based voice AI for everything. To give a little background, I'm the product and community manager at a company called Matrix Labs. Matrix Labs is an AIoT development company. We have two boards currently, the Matrix Creator and the Matrix Voice, that have a bunch of sensors, microphone arrays, processors, and these boards can be used to prototype something, create a product. There are companies building products with our boards. There are students learning with our boards. There are researchers, creating solutions with our boards as well. And so this talk is going to walk you through a little bit about how voice can be used, like private voice, like solutions that are out there right now can be used with different types of hardware. This particular use case in this talk, will show you how to use it with the Raspberry Pi and the Matrix Creator, and basically exhibit a very basic example, simple pipeline of how you can use privacy-focused voice solutions to create a product or project for your home or even for industrial applications. So I guess let's get started. So private edge-based voice AI for everything, that's what our talk is on. So the potential of voice. So voice, the market value, this is just from a quick Google search and a PR Newswire article popped up. It was valued at 1.7 billion in 2019, and the global voice assistant market is predicted to attain a value of 26.9 billion by 2030. That's advancing at about 30% compound annual growth rate in the 10 years in question, and that's pretty rapid growth. And I would bet that it would actually be quicker too now, given that with our situation with the virus, the need for hands-free solutions is so much more important right now. Just solutions where you don't have to touch anything, where you can control things in public places with voice. I feel like the need for that is now going to skyrocket. So pros of voice assistants in general, right? They're hands-free, they're convenient, efficient, and a lot of the times they have multi-language support. So a lot of the times support for different languages is still being built out, but there's definitely a possibility of more languages being supported, and therefore it being a more or less universal solution. Cons, models are still improving, so there can be errors with understanding. When you're okay, Google, switch the song to blah, and Google messes up. Well, that still happens sometimes, and that's a little bit annoying, but it's still improved a whole lot since this first started being developed. And the other big con that a lot of people prefer not to be a part of is the lack of privacy, because especially for big player voice assistants, there can be the audio data whether it's during commands or even while the device is idle, may be sent to the cloud, to servers, and that's a con for a lot of people. Use cases. So voice can be used in so many different areas, right? It can be used at home, which we do all the time when we're using Alexa, Siri, or Google Assistant on our phones, but even on our Amazon Echoes and Google Homes, we're using voice solutions. So there's that. But also medical. So a lot, right now there's a company that's building a solution with our devices which transcribes doctor-patient interactions and smart tags it using an AI that they've created. And so even though that's not necessarily a voice assistant. It's still a voice-enabled solution, right? And there are probably so many more applications in the medical field of voice-related like products. Restaurants as well. Like imagine going into a restaurant and being like, those little, nowadays you have those little iPad things where you can order. What if there was also voice integrated into that? So you can order in a noisy environment because hopefully like it's sophisticated enough to have that noise suppression. And then there doesn't need to be somebody coming and taking your order. And then the same way in like retail warehouses, when you're querying for items, things like that, voice can be super useful, so you don't have to go at a computer and touch that keyboard and spend time doing that, right? Museums too, where you're like just anywhere where you're trying to retrieve information, and you want to know something, and it's simple enough that you can use a voice command, and then your response can be logged, and information can then be retrieved from a database or something like that. Any application like that, voice can be used. So voice has huge potential. So why private voice? So again, like going over well-known solutions like Google Assistant, Alexa, and Siri, they work great. They have great algorithms in terms of like hearing you when it's noisy and things like that. But they do listen in and send data to the cloud even when it's inactive, which means like when you haven't said Alexa or when you haven't said okay Google, or when you haven't said Siri, it's always listening for that wake word, and you don't know when that data that it's listening in on is being sent to the cloud and what's being done with it. And that is a concern for many people. So there are some open source privacy focused alternatives that are gaining popularity. So there's Mycroft, which is open source, as is mentioned, made for Linux and Raspberry Pis. There's Raspy, that's a community-built project with hot swappable brands of open source like speech-to-text engines, natural language understanding engines. So you can there are a few open source ones and you can sort of hot swap them and create sort of your own conglomeration of voice assistant. And then there's Mozilla's Deep Speech, which is speech-to-text based on TensorFlow Lite models from the Common Voice dataset. And I'll link all of these, so if the slides are sent out to people, you can check all of these out because they're super interesting. And each has their own pros and cons and work on different devices. I think they all work on Raspberry Pis and Linux, so definitely very developer-friendly. So generally for these solutions, the training for the voice assistant may have happened in the cloud, but the inference is running on your device. So that's why it's private edge-based voice AI, right? No data is being sent back and forth to any server, so the individual user, so you have more control over the information, like the audio information going in and out, right? Okay, so private voice with hardware. So all of these open source voice solutions can be used with hardware. And so Raspberry Pis are the most popular platform that I know of that can use hardware. So right here I have a Matrix Creator with a Raspberry Pi. So the Matrix Creator, as I had mentioned before, is a board. There'll be a slide with more information on it, and it has a bunch of processors, an 8-microphone array, an FPGA, an ARM Cortex-M3 microcontroller, it has a bunch of communications. So what's cool about it is that there's a lot of different components here that you can leverage, and then you can also attach components via the GPIOs. So this is sitting on a Raspberry Pi 3 right now. It can definitely work on a Raspberry Pi 4. It would probably work faster on a Raspberry Pi 4. But so I have it attached to a speaker so that we can hear whatever voice feedback, like text-to-speech feedback we have from the voice assistant in the demo that I'll show you guys shortly. So going back to the slides, so I'll be showing you an example using the Matrix Creator and the Pi. So the Pi will be running a privacy-focused voice assistant and use the Matrix Creator's microphones for audio input. The Matrix Creator has 8 of those. The Pi will also be running the Mozilla IoT Gateway. So the reason that in this particular demo, it doesn't have to be with the gateway. You can honestly use voice with any other platform to even just like write C++, Python, or JavaScript code to respond to voice commands and react in some way. But using a visual web UI, I feel like would be a good way to exhibit how voice control can then be converted into an action, like based on intents, right? So the Pi will be running the Mozilla IoT Gateway, and it will be controlling Matrix Creator's LEDs and reading sensor values, or like reacting to sensor values, because Matrix Creator also has a bunch of sensors. And yeah, so that's the idea. So to show you an example pipeline of voice controlling a smart device. And this is in particular a developer-friendly device, so if you were to create your own product, you have much more flexibility. Okay, so the Matrix Creator. It's a hardware development board for the Raspberry Pi. It includes several sensors. I won't read them off the page. Communication protocols, controllers, like the ARM Cortex-M3 microcontroller and Xilinx Spartan 6 FPGA. It has GPIO, so you can add external sensors or motors or things like that. And it has 35 LEDs. So that's like some nice visual feedback. The Mozilla Web Things Gateway is a web interface to monitor and control smart home devices. So basically you can add a Wi-Fi switch and a smart light that maybe is Zigbee controlled, maybe even Wi-Fi controlled, a lot of different things. And then you can, through this web UI, click and, control all these things. What's nice is I'm going to be showing you with a voice add-on that is in that gateway system how you can use voice to then control the Matrix Creator, monitor and control the Matrix Creator. Okay, so moving into the demo, I'm first going to show you how the gateway looks. And so this is what it looks like right now. So the voice assistant that I'll be running on this particular demo is called Snips. Snips, unfortunately, has been acquired and so no longer exists for developers, like no longer is free to use for developers. But because the binaries for this voice assistant was was pulled down before it got acquired, it still works with the Mozilla IoT Gateway and is readily available as an add-on. And therefore I'm still using it to exhibit the same idea, but other voice assistants can also be used with the gateway or with other platforms. You probably just need to put in a little more development work, but it definitely is doable. So this is the Mozilla IoT Gateway. As you can see, we have a Snips add-on. Let me zoom in so everybody can hopefully see better. So there's an add-on called Snips. So if you go in there, the way this add-on was created, so Mozilla IoT Gateway also has an API for you to create custom add-ons and such. And so these can be customized by developers. And so this is how the Snips add-on looks. You can set alarms, reminders, countdowns, things like that. The idea is, honestly, if there were a different integration with a different voice assistant, there could be different criteria, like it could be different commands for the different nodes, things like that. And then we've created our own Matrix Creator add-on to monitor and control our Matrix board. And as you can see, these are all the temperature, these are all the sensor readings, and then you can also control the LEDs. So that's super nice. Dynamic sensor readings, and also ability to control LEDs. And so that's the state of the Matrix Creator add-on so far. So the Web Things Gateway has, to walk you through really quickly how it works. So the Things tab is where you can control different things, right? Whether it's like, a voice assistant, a smart device, your smart lamp, your smart Wi-Fi switch, things like that. Then there's a Rules tab, and this is my favorite part. And this is the part that will exhibit how you can really easily. You could do it through code as well really easily, but through this web UI very easily match voice commands to actions. Right, so this is a rule I'd created before. I called it the timer rule. And this is, this particular example maybe isn't, like, in itself, like, it's a very, very basic example. But the idea is that it's a starting point for those who want to, develop, like, actionable, like, develop solutions that solve problems with a voice to action, like, pipeline, using, like, development boards where you have sensors, you can add other components, things like that, right? So this really simple rule, basically, so the way this works is super easy. You just sort of drag things, you sort of drag things into, and you can drag them back out. But basically here it's saying, okay, if Snips has a timer equal to, wow, Snips just heard me, equal to 1.
The timer has been set for 14 hours and 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, that was Snips responding to me because the wake word is hey Snips. But okay, so the timer, if there's one timer, then turn the matrix creator green and turn it on. So that means, like, turn the LEDs green, turn it on. And then the while can become an if, but if it's a while, that means while this thing is happening, then it'll be green, and then once it's not happening anymore, it won't be green anymore. So that's one of the rules, and I can show you really quickly how it works. So here I have the matrix creator, and I'm going to say, hey Snips. Hey Snips, set a timer for 10 seconds.
The timer has been set for 10 seconds.
And there it is, super bright, super green. And yeah, wow, super bright. But after 10 seconds, it's going to turn off, and because the timer has ended. So the idea is basically, like, you are giving the voice command, something is happening. This is just turning on LEDs, but it can be way cooler than that. And I mean, way more useful than that, given whatever application you have in whatever industry vertical, right? So that's like the cool part about it. So going back to here, there's like another rule to exhibit how you can maybe use it as a monitoring tool. So going into rule, it's super simple, super silly, but basically if the matrix creator's pitch value is greater than 60 degrees, then say pitching. And that's using, like, the text-to-speech aspect of it. And so if I show you real quick, every time the matrix creator's
pitching
is greater than 60 degrees,
pitching,
it says pitching, which is kind of funny. But regardless, you can see how this could be used for a variety of applications. Like, you could, using just this interface itself, say, if somebody says, like, hey, wake word, I want to order a glass of a chocolate milkshake, and then that gets registered, sent to the database or sent to the kitchen, chocolate milkshake comes out, served in the restaurant, I don't know, an example like that. But basically, this is the kind of technology that will go behind it, not this, and like, this is the kind of hardware you might use. Oops. But yeah, so that's the idea. And going back to the gateway, there's other cool features of the gateway itself, like you can log sensor data over time, so that's pretty cool. You can upload floor plans. This is particularly for home automation. So, particularly for your home, this is really helpful, like the Mozilla IoT Gateway. But honestly, it could also be used in more like widespread scenarios, like to control different components in a restaurant, maybe to control lights all over a restaurant if you upload a floor plan here, or even a retail store where you're querying for different items, right? So yeah, I mean, the idea for this particular talk was to exhibit that you can use. The most important part is all of this happened on the device, which means it happened on the Raspberry Pi. It's listening for your wake word on the Raspberry Pi, and it's listening to it through these 8 microphones on our Matrix Creator, and no information is being sent back and forth from the cloud. The Mozilla IoT Gateway, the way it is, like the way I showed you all right now, is local. It's hosting a local server on the Raspberry Pi, and that's how I'm accessing it through my local area network. But Mozilla also has a secure, tunnel, I think is the word. I'm not actually sure. That you can set up to access it from anywhere. Access the gateway from anywhere, but even then, data, the voice data and the audio data will not be sent to the cloud. All the processing will still happen locally on your device, even if you can access your gateway from anywhere in the world, given you log in and stuff like that. It's a super cool example just to show you how voice can be used privately on device without sending data back and forth to the cloud to control maybe more sensitive things. Like, you don't want somebody from another country that's not in your restaurant to be able to hack into your system and order a milkshake. But there are obviously way more applications, especially now when, with the way the world seems to be going, we're going to have to be more wary of what we touch, how we interact with our environment when we're outdoors. Maybe voice is the way we, still socialize, but without having to touch as many surfaces, without having to interact with as many, sensitive surfaces. Yeah. So that's basically the idea. You can use other devices, other hardware. There are other boards that you can use this with, other than the Raspberry Pi. This is a lot of these voice assistants can be set up on your computer, but the reason we're showing it on a specific piece of hardware is that if you were to create a product that resides in, if you have several Matrix creators or Matrix voices, which is the smaller version of our board that has 8 microphones and not as many sensors, but it has GPIOs where you can add external devices, you could place several of those all around a store or a restaurant, and different people would have access to this voice-controlled little hub that's part of this mesh network bigger system that's sending data to a central, that's sending query data to a central, computer somewhere, and being able to give the customer relevant information or react appropriately to queries or needs by consumers without having to touch anything, and potentially with multilingual support. So voice is going to be important, especially even things that already exist, incorporating voice into those now could really change how people interact and make people more comfortable interacting with things in everyday life, maybe going outside more often. Hopefully this talk gave you a little bit of confidence that very easily, this that I showed you today, the demo, can be very easily set up in maybe 20 minutes. I'll include a link in our presentation slide, so if everybody gets access to that, they can see the link. I'll also include it at the end so people can check it out. But we have step-by-step instructions on how to set this up. The Mozilla IoT Gateway is online. All of our libraries to interact with the Matrix Creator is open source, and so you can get started really easily trying to create prototypes of solutions like this and then test them out. So yeah, that's basically the talk that I wanted to share with you all, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please leave any feedback or questions you have, and I'll try my best to answer them. As for Matrix Labs, you can find us at matrix.one, and We have a community forum where if you ask us questions, we'll always try to get back to you as quickly as possible. That's community.matrix.one. We also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/matrixlabs, with all our tutorials, step-by-step guides, videos, all of that stuff. Hackster page, hackster.io/matrix-labs, same deal, but in written form, so whatever works best for you. So yeah, please, let us know if you have any questions, and if you want to, play around with different aspects of privacy-focused voice, or even Google Assistant or Alexa integrations with hardware that you can, that you can then add components to control or react, then, please reach out. Thank you very much.